Good evening, everyone. My name is Sal Mangiafico. I work for Rutgers Cooperative Extension, and I welcome everyone to our Earth Day Everyday series for the fall of 2020. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Amy Menzel. She works as the Communications Manager at the Atlantic County Utilities Authority in Egg Harbor Township, and is an ardent recycler and promoter of recycling. Amy serves as the coordinator for the Atlantic County Session class of the Rutgers Environmental Stewards Program, which is hosted at the Atlantic County Utilities Authority. She is a Stockton University graduate and also serves on the Environmental Commission and Green Committee in Hamilton, New Jersey. Thanks everyone for being here tonight.
All right. Hi, can everybody hear me okay? I hope so.
I think you sound okay.
Good. I'm happy to be here. My name is Amy Menzel. I'm here from the Atlantic County Utilities Authority. And my hometown is Hamilton, New Jersey, blueberry capital of the world. Here we go. We're going to talk about some recycling basics. I hope that we're trying to keep it so that we're going to be talking about things that apply to everybody, regardless of where you're from. But I do have to give a little disclaimer that I was thinking about New Jersey residents primarily. So I'm excited that there's people from other parts of the country, and I hope that we'll be able to hear from you about how things are different or the same as we go through this. So,
hi, Amy. It's Sal. Can I just butt in for a second?
Yeah, please.
I can't open those initial poll questions.
Okay,
so I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, take away the hosting abilities, and hopefully I'll be able to just open them.
And if not, it's not a big deal either.
Oh, you know what? Boy. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. We're not able to open those initial questions.
No worries.
So what I'll say is, so our initial questions were just about where people are from, which we got some sense as people were checking in, and also if you have curbside recycling and how well you think you do with recycling properly in your home or say maybe at work, if that's what you want to answer. Okay, so I'll just turn it over back to you. Thanks.
Okay,
You'll
great.
have to reshare your screen, I think.
Okay. Okay. We're okay now?
Mm-hmm. Looks good.
All right. Great. So here we go. All right. So I just wanted to give you a little point of reference. I'm talking to you here from Atlantic County in the southern part of the state. And to let you know a little bit about the Atlantic County Utilities Authority, our job is to manage waste that's generated in Atlantic County. I know it's not very glamorous, but it's a really important job. And we have both a solid waste and wastewater division, plus a satellite location in Cumberland County where we do some collections. So if you've ever traveled to Atlantic City, you may have seen the wind turbines spinning. They're located at our wastewater treatment facility. We've also got 2,700 solar panels there, so we can use renewable energy to help us treat the 28 million gallons of wastewater that we get from 14 towns every day. At our environmental park at Egg Harbor Township, we have a transfer station, landfill, recycling center, a 10-acre vegetative waste compost site, a maintenance center, truck wash, compressed natural gas, and biodiesel fueling stations. It's also the site of our administrative offices and other amenities like our community garden, compost demonstration site, playground made from recycled materials, nature trails, and more. So you kind of get the idea that recycling is just part of what we do, but it's a very important part. And recycling is something that touches everybody, and it's something we can all do to help the environment. The recycling is pretty simple in concept. We know the recycling symbol, those 3 chasing arrows, and how they illustrate the circular nature of the process. First, materials are collected and processed, then made into new products. The third part doesn't always get as much attention, but it's really important to close the loop and purchase products that are made with recycled material. Most of us intuitively know that recycling is a good thing. Instead of tossing away something when we're done with it, we give it new life and utility through recycling. But take a look, recycling provides a lot of benefits, from saving space in the landfill to conserving resources, reducing pollution and energy use, to creating jobs and revenue. All of this from the simple act of recycling. So first on the list there is saving landfill space. That's pretty clear. Anything we do, for anything that we recycle, we're keeping it out of the landfill. And New Jersey is so densely populated, it's really difficult to think about building new landfills or expanding the ones that we have. So it's really important to keep items that can be recycled out of the landfill. Recycling conserves natural resources. This is just another point that most people understand. Making paper, for example, from old magazines and junk mail means we don't have to cut down as many trees. So you've probably seen some of these recycling factoids, and here's just a few to consider. It's easy to forget that everything we use comes from nature. It can be especially hard to make this connection when you are looking at plastics. But that water bottle comes from somewhere. It comes from petroleum, and that's a non-renewable resource. So recycling is a way to slow the depletion of our natural resources. Think too about steel and aluminum and the amount of energy it takes to mine the ore from deep under the ground and to process it into the metals that we use. There's really an incredible amount of energy that can be saved by recycling. And a lot of those extractive processes are also really polluting. They impact the air and water quality and emit greenhouse gases. So even with paper and glass, which come from materials that may be more abundant or that can be sustainably sourced, there's still a significant savings and benefit to the environment by using recycled materials to create new products. And there at the bottom of the screen, I have a link to the EPA's tool called IWARM, the Individual Waste Reduction Model Tool. And you may find it embedded on some websites. You can also access it from the EPA's recycling pages. That's really cool because you can, you can look in your recycling bin and say, oh wow, there's got 5 aluminum cans and 2 glass bottles and 3 newspapers. You could just type those in there, and it will, spit out, and it'll do all the calculations and tell you how much energy you're saving by recycling those few items. And I have a whole list of resources that I've asked Sal to share with participants afterwards, so you don't have to get too hung up about any websites that I reference. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'll just keep going here, because if you've got questions, we may be answering them as we go along. But I'm sure Sal can jump in and shout at me to stop if there's something that's really burning the house down. So I wanted to give you a snapshot of the economic benefits real quick first. So the numbers here are not from this year, but they really aren't that different. And they're big. These are big impacts. So this is something that's really important to keep this in mind when we're thinking about recycling. It's not just the environment. There's jobs and wages and revenue that are generated from recycling. People have been recycling forever. Whether it was a sword that became a plowshare or a worn shirt that became part of a patchwork quilt or a rag rug. In earlier times, items were made by skilled craftsmen or hand-stitched by somebody's mom. There was really more of an appreciation for the time and resources that were required to create things that people use than just run out to Walmart and get something new when something broke. So during the 1960s and 1970s, we saw a greater concern about pollution and waste and a new environmental movement. In 1970, we had the first Earth Day, and that really worked to raise awareness about protecting resources, curbing pollution, and there was a growing interest in recycling. There were some drop-off centers that sprung up to offer environmentally minded people a chance to recycle. And then up in the corner in the far right, do you guys remember the Mobro 4000, that garbage barge? It set off from New York City and it was going to North Carolina for disposal. And when it got there, they said, no, no, we don't want this. And it traveled all the way down the coast and got turned away from port after port, went all the way down to Belize before turning back and trying its way up the coast again. And it finally ended up in New York City, back in New York City. There was a heated legal battle and the trash finally got incinerated in New York. So this was a really hot topic and brought attention to the problem of waste and the issue of landfills and their capacity. So really helped to bring some light on recycling too. So New Jersey has always been a leader in recycling. And Woodbury, New Jersey was the first town in the nation to mandate curbside recycling back in 1980. Now, Rhode Island gets some credit for having the first statewide recycling mandate for their citizens in 1986. Oregon had some legislation for communities of a specific size to recycle. But New Jersey was really the first state to pass a truly comprehensive recycling law. And that was in 1987. The statewide Mandatory Source Separation and Recycling Act, which applied to all residents and included businesses and institutions like schools and hospitals and prisons. So that's a big deal. That's everybody. And what's really kind of neat about this is that it was a bipartisan effort. Doesn't that just warm your heart? You can see here on the left of Governor Kane is Republican Assemblyman Arthur Albom, and to the right is Democrat Paul Cantillo, co-sponsors of this law. So some of the key points of this law: the law required each county to develop a plan with a strategy for collecting and marketing materials. So this is important to note. Even today, there's some differences from county to county on what's accepted and how recycling works. These variations arise from different factors, things like access to markets and hauling costs. And so after the county plans were developed and approved, the next step was for municipalities to develop ordinances that based on their county's recycling plan. So some municipalities went beyond what their county required and designated additional materials for recycling through their own ordinances. So that gives you a little sense of why things are different from place to place. Since the late 1980s, things have changed. Equipment and sorting materials are more technologically advanced. Vehicles and collection methods have changed too. Some towns, you have those automatic trucks with the arm that comes out and lifts up the can. For us at ACUA, our collection vehicles have changed over time. We used to have trucks that had 2 or more segregated areas to collect different types of materials. Today we use compressed natural gas trucks, and it's one big section. It's a packer truck, kind of like it looks like a trash truck. Even the containers we use have changed. So we're moving away from the open buckets to lidded wheeled carts. And those carts have a lot of advantages. They keep the material dry, they prevent material from blowing out and creating litter. They're easy to move, and they look nice. You see all those carts up and down the street on recycling day. It looks nice. So we even changed how we share information about recycling. Community and school events are still a great way to engage with people on recycling during the pandemic. But now we've got social media and the internet to help share information and get the word out about recycling. You see, even our recycling mascot, Super Cannon, has gone through some changes. The one change you may have noted is how we collect recycling. In the 1990s, there were a lot of programs that started moving from dual stream collection to single stream collection. Dual stream, as the name implies, means you had 2 bins. There was one for paper and cardboard and one for bottles and cans. Single stream means you can put all your recyclables into one container. The benefits of single stream include increased participation. It's easier and definitely more convenient, especially for schools and businesses and apartment complexes where space for collection containers may be at a premium. But there's another big plus, and that's on the collection side. Think about it. I mentioned we used to have a truck with a divider. So half was for cans and bottles, half for paper and cardboard. They'd be out collecting material. One side is full. They've got to drive all the way back to the recycling center, dump it out, and then head all the way back to their route. So now the trucks that we use, since everything's mixed together, the trucks that we use can hold 3 times as much material. So that makes collections much more efficient. It takes less time, less fuel, less emissions, less man hours. A downside is that sometimes when you tell people they can put everything in one container, they really do put everything in one container, sometimes things that don't belong. Let's take a little more time to talk about the steps of the recycling process. The first step is collection and processing. So depending on where you live, this could be curbside collection, it could be drop-off centers, or if you're in another state, you may have deposit refund program for bottles. Once the recyclables are collected, they're taken to a materials recovery facility, or MRF. I sometimes just call it the recycling center. MRF sounds like a noise my dog makes. At the MRF, people and machines work to sort and separate the incoming material. At the AC way, the trucks come in and dump the material onto the tipping floor. And from there, the mixed material is conveyed through a series of sorting processes and stations. On the bottom left, you can see a photo of the equipment that helps to separate paper and cardboard from other material. When these rows of discs are spinning, paper and cardboard, which are more two-dimensional, they float over the top while bottles and cans drop in between the discs and onto a conveyor below that. We have a big magnet to pull out metal cans and something called an eddy current, which is kind of like a reverse magnet that repels aluminum cans off the end of a conveyor belt. At the bottom in the middle is an optical sorter. This machine uses a beam of light to detect different densities of plastic. So when a water bottle comes down the line and is detected, a puff of air propels it off the end of the conveyor. So sorting's become more automated, but there's still a lot of people on the lines because they do a good job with sorting and quality control, which is really important. Once each type of material has been separated, it's loaded into a machine called a baler that squashes the material into a block, wraps it up in wire to hold it together. So these bales are sized to fit perfectly into containers for transport and shipping to manufacturers. Depending on the material and the available markets, recyclables may travel a long distance for further processing. So are we okay? We can keep going here, Sal? Yes? I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
Do you want to know a little bit
in?
about the survey results from what people
Sure.
are doing? Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a variety of results. Most people have some kind of curbside.
Good.
It was mentioned that sometimes it can be confusing as to what should be put in there.
We're going to talk about that. Yep.
There's some different frequencies. Some people have every week. Some people have every other week. Some people have 2 times a month.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a difference, right?
Some people have full commingle. Some people separate out certain things like cardboard. Someone has single stream but thought they might get rid of single stream. And also somebody doesn't have recycling where they are, but they have to haul it to an adjacent county, but I don't know where that person is.
Okay. All right. So yeah, there's a lot of variation, huh? All right. Well, let's keep going here and we'll talk about all this stuff. So how are we doing in New Jersey? The New Jersey DEP, our Department of Environmental Protection, collects annual recycling tonnage data from every municipality. And it does take time to kind of true up those results. So the most recent data we have is from 2017. And New Jersey has a target recycling rate of 50% of the municipal solid waste stream. And that's the waste from homes, businesses, schools, and other institutions. So we're at 40% of that municipal solid waste recycling rate. It's close, but not quite. So there's still room for improvement there for sure. New Jersey has a second goal, which is a target percentage of the total solid waste. So that's the other stuff, the regular municipal solid waste that we talked about, plus waste from industrial sources. And our target was 60%, and in 2017 we achieved our target. So, yay, good job. Nationally, the recycling rate in the same year was 35%. So New Jersey's, we're ahead of the curve there. We talked a little bit about how recycling varies from county to county. There's even more variation from state to state for similar reasons. And we saw that from people's responses as to what kind of, how they recycle. Things like access to markets, transportation, and disposal costs all figure in there. For example, I've also, collection as far as, rural communities. It might be more challenging for municipality to provide easy and affordable access to curbside collection in a really rural area. So I think if you do have curbside collection, it's definitely a plus for participation. So I think in New Jersey we do have a lot of curbside offerings, which helps us. So you probably heard about this. Until recently, we sent a lot of waste to China. In 2016, the US sent 700,000 tons to China, and China imported 7 million tons from around the world. It might sound crazy to ship materials such a long distance, but think about it. Cargo ships bring consumer goods from China to the US. We've all seen the Made in China label on stuff that we buy. So we've got all this stuff coming to us, gets unloaded, now we have an empty ship. So rather than send it back to China empty, recycling could be loaded up and shipped at a very favorable rate. China, the demand for materials is high, labor costs were low, and China's contamination standard was also low. They were not very picky about the material. Over time, though, this started to cause some problems for China. China was receiving large quantities of dirty, contaminated materials for recycling. And the processing facilities in China were really getting overwhelmed by this material. So the Chinese government began imposing regulations. Green Fence in 2013 focused on inspections, and we had National Sword. So we've gone from a fence to a sword, so things are getting serious. And by 2018, there was a ban on 24 different types of materials, and a new contamination rate was set at 0.5%, which is very, very difficult to achieve. So this is definitely a challenging time for the recycling industry. There are less markets, and without a place to go, some of the material that had been accepted before will be landfilled or incinerated. And our own recycling infrastructure may have been neglected a little bit while the times were so good and China was taking all the material in its poorly sorted state. And another challenge is the confusion about recycling. People don't really understand what to recycle, how it works, why it matters. So I'm a real raging optimist, so I see these challenges as perhaps opportunities. Things look a little bleak right now, but this is also a chance for us to step back and to look for better solutions. New markets will develop, but not instantly. This takes time. Investors are looking at building processing facilities in the US, and even some displaced Chinese processors have announced plans to open new plants in the US, in South Carolina and Alabama. We can improve our processing methods as well. This might mean something as simple as adjusting existing machinery or slowing down the processing speed so that we can better remove the things that don't belong. But whenever you're slowing something down or adding more people, these things cost money, so that's something to remember. These challenges for recycling have really raised people's awareness about waste, and I think that's a good thing. People may be upset about the changes to their recycling program if they've experienced that, And while it's a shame that we can't just throw everything in the bin and know that it will magically become something new, this is the perfect opportunity to talk about recycling and for people to think about their own behavior, their consumption, and the waste they generate. Many corporations have stepped up with voluntary commitments to include more recycled content in their products, and some states, Washington and California, have proposed legislation to require this. And along with this, there's also increased awareness and discussion about designing products that are easier to recycle. What can you recycle? Many programs have changed. At ACUA, for example, in response to the change in the markets, we had to make adjustments to our guidelines. In the back is our old messaging. We used to accept all different types of plastic. We just told people 1 through 7, no styrofoam and no bags. Now you can see our new guidelines here. We accept number 1 and number 2 plastic. So that was the biggest change for us in the plastics. As for plastics, low-grade plastics are no longer accepted in many programs, but number 1 and number 2 plastics are accepted by most. So number 1 and number 2, what are these numbers? The numbers that are on the bottom of plastic products are resin identification codes. There's so many different kinds of plastic, and each has its own physical and chemical properties, different melting points, different strengths, all kinds of things. So this numbering system was developed by the plastics industry to help identify the different types. I think it was a little deceptive, actually very deceptive. People see that recycling symbol and they assume that it can go right into the recycling bin, and that is not correct. It only identifies the type of plastic. We can take a quick look at these different types. Number 1 is PET, polyethylene terephthalate, and that's what most soda and water bottles are made out of. Number 2 is HDPE, high density polyethylene. Milk jugs and detergent bottles are made out of HDPE. Number 3, PVC, polyvinyl chloride. You might know this from pipes. It's also cling films, and some kind of bottles are made out of PVC. Number 4 is LDPE, or low density polyethylene. Shopping bags, single-use bags, squeezable bottles, and some other things are made out of the LDPE. Number 5 is polypropylene, yogurt containers, margarine tubs, things of that nature. Number 6 is polystyrene, egg cartons, packing peanuts, cups and plates made out of styrofoam. That's the brand name for polystyrene. It's actually 2 different kinds of polystyrene, expanded and extruded. So the foamy stuff is the expanded. You may see some other type of number 6 that doesn't look like that. And number 7 is other. So that's kind of a catch-all for a bunch of other stuff. The number 1 and number 2 are the easiest to recycle. Number 4 and 5, many programs had that in there and have taken that off. They're a little more challenging. And number 3, number 6, and number 7, they're the really tough ones to recycle. All right, so moving beyond plastic, we have paper and cardboard, which are very recyclable. Most programs accept a variety of paper, from newspaper to cereal boxes to junk mail and magazines and all kinds of cardboard boxes. Glass bottles and jars are commonly recycled in New Jersey. In the US, bottles are made with about 30 to 40% recycled content. But only about 30% of all glass is recycled. So again, there's an opportunity. There's a lot of glass that's not getting recycled. In about a year, the world's largest glass recycling facility will be opening in New Jersey, in Andover, New Jersey. It's called Pace Glass. So I think glass recycling will be with us for a while in New Jersey. Steel and aluminum can be recycled over and over and over and over, and that's a great thing. We talked about the economic and environmental cost of mining for virgin material. In this picture, you can see hiding in there, there's a little piece of aluminum foil. This may or may not be accepted in your county program, so please check before tossing that in there. A lot of times aluminum foil can be contaminated with food, so sometimes that's the reason they ask you to keep it out. Okay, there are many other things that are recyclable, but maybe not in your bin. We could spend all day talking about what else you can recycle, but I just wanted to touch on a few things. You'll need to find out for all this stuff what's the best option in your area. And in some cases, there may be a cost to recycle some of these things. You want to start with your county or municipal website. And there's some really great tools out there. At the ACUA, we use something called the Waste Wizard. And there's a search bar. You can just type in an item and it will tell you what your options are and send you to a page with more information to help you with recycling. In Atlantic County, the first 5 items on this list can be brought to the ACUA for disposal. In most cases, there is a fee, but it's lower than it would be to dispose of the items as trash. And again, your municipality may accept these items and they may even collect them curbside. So you just need to find out. Just want to take a moment to talk about yard waste and food waste. These organic materials take up a significant portion of the waste stream, and it's really not that hard to keep them out. Grass clippings can stay on your lawn to break down and provide nutrients to the soil. This is also called grass cycling or cut it and leave it. Leaves can get mulched and used in garden beds, and home composting is easier than you might think. You don't need to spend a lot of money or time, and you don't need a lot of space to do it either. Even apartment dwellers can use a worm bin to turn food scraps into nutrient-rich vermicompost. I'm a geek about this stuff, so I've got worm bins at home. I have a couple in my basement, and I have one in my living room. My husband asked me what it was doing there, and I just, I feel like if I'm telling people they can do this in a small space, they don't need to have a basement or a laundry room, then I gotta, kind of walk the walk there. And it's perfectly fine. You don't smell anything. There's no cloud of fruit flies in our living room. It's just fine. So New Jersey is also, being the environmental leader, we recently passed legislation to encourage food waste recycling. This law is for large generators, so places like hospitals, prisons, supermarkets, people who make over 52 tons of food waste per year. They're required to separate the food waste and take it to authorized facilities within 25 miles of them. They can get a waiver if there isn't a food waste recycling facility within 25 miles, or if the disposal costs are more than 10% higher than it would normally cost to dispose of the material. Okay, so it's not perfect, but this legislation is really a step towards recognizing the importance of recycling food waste. So you've seen drop boxes in parking lots for clothing, and you may have your own favorite thrift store or charity to donate used clothing and household items. Did you know about Habitat for Humanity's restores? They're there for building supplies, tools, and home improvement items. So there are options for donating so many different kinds of items, from toys to bikes to plastic bags. Electronics are something I want to mention. They're banned from disposal in landfills in New Jersey. And technology changes so quickly, it's often not possible to just keep upgrading your same device. But there are a lot of options for e-waste recycling. Again, check your county and municipal websites. In Atlantic County, we often point people to the Goodwill store. They accept electronics and TVs, whether they're working or not. They're not putting them back on the shelf, they're recycling them in partnership with Dell Corporation's Reconnect program. And many towns have drop-off days for electronics or collection days. Our local 4-H has a monthly drop-off that's a fundraiser for their clubs. Batteries. Batteries are confusing to many people. Regular alkaline batteries have changed over time and now have less toxic substances in them. Used to be a lot of mercury. Today, people are told to put those regular disposable batteries right in the trash. Rechargeable batteries are a different story. They're composed of different materials and they should be recycled, but not in the recycling bin. Lithium-ion batteries can catch on fire when they're crushed or damaged. And that picture there is one of our trucks with this caught on fire from a battery in one of those little vape pens. So it's a big deal. Stores like Home Depot and Lowe's often have recycling collection containers for batteries, and county hazardous waste programs also accept these batteries along with car and boat batteries and a lot of other materials like CFLs, motor oils, and household chemicals. That's not all. There's many, many other outlets for items that you might not have even considered for recycling. TerraCycle is a New Jersey company that has programs for a wide variety of real oddball items. Things like candy wrappers and chip bags to spent magic markers and even cigarette butts. Some of TerraCycle's collection programs are for very specific brands and others are more general. Some are free, some have a fee. So you can go to their website and see if there's a collection program near you or even start your own. Earth 911 is another good place to search for unusual items. I just have to give you a little disclaimer. You need to double check after you find some information there before you load up your car with all the number 5 plastic that you've been hoarding for a year and drive it somewhere and make sure that that's actually the case. Always good to do. Okay, so how you can help. Hopefully.
Can I interrupt again, Amy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me start our evaluation poll. It's getting to be about that time. So I did want to mention the first question on that poll that I'll put up in a minute will be a consent to use your data for research. So we're basically just asking you what you thought of the program and what you intend to do with the information you learned. So you can accept or not accept that as you want. You don't feel the need that you have to participate in this research, but we just use it to evaluate programs. And at some point we'll put together all the numbers from the different webinars we've had and hopefully come up with something meaningful. Also on the poll, it'll be open for 20 minutes. So make sure you finish by then, but also make sure you hit submit when you're done with the poll so that your responses will be recorded. Okay, thanks. I'll open that up in just a second.
All right, so I can keep going?
Yep.
All right. So hopefully you've got some ideas about what you can do to strengthen and improve recycling already, but let's take a look at some of the more universal actions that we can all take. Remember, there are subtle differences from place to place, and it's really important to learn how to recycle in your area. Empty, clean, and dry are 3 words that really warm the hearts of recycling professionals everywhere. Some people throw up their hands and say, I don't have time for that. I just can't do that. But you don't have to put things in the dishwasher or scrub them clean. It's just a quick rinse and get the liquids out of there, get the food waste out. Plastic bags are a huge problem at recycling centers. They get tangled in the sorting machinery and cause jams and damage equipment. Several times a day, the machinery has to get shut down and the workers have to climb in there and cut those bags loose. So please don't put your bags in the recycling. Take them to be recycled, maybe at the grocery store, or there's a lot of places that do accept them, even in the time of the fear of everything. There are places where you can recycle your plastic bags. Even better, don't get them in the first place, but don't put them in the bin, please. Keep items loose in the container. Bags make it hard to know if the material is accepted. And once at the MRF, somebody's got to tear those bags open and dispose of the bag. And it might not seem like a big deal, but when you look at the scale of things and you see, tons and tons and tons of recycling piled up in all these bags, it's really adds up. So keep those bags out. Don't recycle shredded paper in your curbside recycling. Shredded paper is great to recycle, but not in your bin. And that's because those bags that it's in can get torn, and once the paper is loose, there's no way it can get separated for recycling. A lot of programs have a special drop-off for shredded paper. Keep contaminants out of your recycling. Food waste can decrease the value of materials. What does your recycling program say about pizza boxes? Are they recyclable? In Atlantic County, We used to say yes. We used to say yes, except if it's greasy. Don't put a greasy pizza box in. Now we say no because people aren't really great about making that distinction between greasy and clean. So, but if you look at that box, the greasy part is the bottom. What I do is I tear off the top and put the top in the recycling and put the bottom in the trash. If you're not sure about whether you can recycle something and you don't have an opportunity to look up on your municipal or county website, don't include it. Wish cycling is what we call that, and it really only hurts the process. It's important to look for items with recycled content when you're shopping, or to think about what will happen to the item when you're finished with it. If possible, I know it's not always possible, and it's coming from a place of privilege to say that, but choose items that can be recycled if you can. And you may see that that symbol on there, the recycling symbol, to show that something is made with recycled content. There's two different types of content. You may see post-consumer. That's recycled material that's actually been picked up from our curbs and used again. Post-industrial, you don't really see that on there, but it just may say recycled content. That's a material that's come from the scrap in manufacturing. So they're both good things. It's not that one's better than the other, but just to know what that means. Recycling is great, but there are even better ways to deal with waste. And if you look at that reduce, reuse, recycle hierarchy, recycling is at the bottom. Now, these other two things are really more important. Reduce. But think before you buy. There's so many ways we can reduce the amount of waste we generate. And in the US, it's about 4 pounds a day per person of waste that's generated. That's really disgusting. That's way too much. Reuse, that's reusable bags, coffee mugs, water bottles, reusing that plastic container you have. They're all great ways to cut down on waste, especially with single-use items, a lot of them which go into the trash after a brief useful life. You can also, there's plenty of other R's that aren't on there, and one of them is refuse. So it's okay to say no thank you. It's best not to shout it when you don't want a bag or a straw, or somebody's offering you something else that you don't need. You can make a difference. I have a photo here of 3 Rutgers environmental stewards who led a recycling inspection and education project for the ACUA. They went through neighborhoods and looked into people's recycling containers. No dumping, no digging, just what they could see. They collected data on the mistakes people made and left oops or great job tags to give people feedback about how they were doing. And in every neighborhood that was inspected, we really saw the recycling quality improve significantly. And that was very encouraging. It shows that people really want to do the right thing. They just often don't know how. So this is just one example of the power of people to impact recycling in our community. Here are some websites. As I mentioned, I have a whole slew more with a little more explanation. But we have here the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection website. That looks like a lot to try and remember, or if you're taking a screenshot, you can just Google NJDEP recycling and you'll get a ton of great information. They can point you to your contacts for your municipal, your county recycling coordinators. It'll show you recycling statistics, information about recycling's funding, the recycling tonnage grants that municipalities receive after reporting their recycling tonnage. So lots of great information on the DEP website. The EPA also has some great information on recycling. And there's actually an effort to develop some national standards for recycling to keep recycling a boost. ANJR.org, ANJR, that's the Association of New Jersey Recyclers. Also a lot of great information there on your local programs, on school recycling, all kinds of good stuff. Recycling Partnership is another organization that helps to strengthen recycling, and they've got all kinds of good tools and signage and images that are there for your use. And come to ACUA's website. We have lots of great information that we're always happy to share, modify. You can take it and use it. Maybe we can help you. We also have a virtual tour of our recycling center, so you can you can visit us from your comfort of your home. And that is it. I'm ready for questions.
Okay, well, we have a few.
Great.
So I'll just kind of go through some of these and see what you think. Okay, one question. Oh, my kitty's here. I just see her tail.
That's a cat for you.
Okay, one question I always wonder about. What happens when things like paper and cardboard get wet in the recycling?
Well, that can happen, and that's one of the reasons why we love the carts that have a lid on them to keep things dry. A little moisture is okay. It's not going to make everything get tossed away, but certainly the drier is better.
Okay, how about bottle caps?
Oh,
supposed to
good.
be removed?
That's one of those it depends things. Depends on your program. So in Atlantic County, we tell people to take the cap off and to toss that into the trash can. The caps are made out of a different type of plastic than the bottle itself. So a long time ago, that was a challenge for the processors to separate that out once the bottle got to them, if it still had a cap on it. That's not such a hard thing anymore. So a lot of places will tell you to leave the cap on. In Atlantic County, we say keep the cap off. That's, our recycling partner asked us, ask for that. But I think it's also very helpful to remind people to empty out their bottles. You'd be surprised, some people will take a couple sips of their water bottle, put the lid on, and throw it in the recycling. So that can be a real problem.
Mm-hmm. How about anything else like, what if you have a regular metal can? Say you need a can opener to take the lid off. The lid can go in the recycling?
Yeah, because we have that big magnet that's going to pull out the steel cans.
How about, the question was, why can't aluminum pans be recycled?
Well, I think that's probably one of those things that's going to, differ from place to place. And in Atlantic County, we are going to tell people not to put them in there, and that's at the request of our recycling partner. And I think that has to do with the food waste. People are not really very good at cleaning things. And if everybody was a real good recycler and put nice clean things in there, we might be able to say, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned TerraCycle.
Mm-hmm.
That's up in Trenton area, I guess.
Yeah.
But are there other companies here in New Jersey, say, that do recycling of materials as opposed to, I guess, sending it to China?
Well, yeah, and I don't know exactly, where the end markets are and how far away they are, but there definitely are domestic processors for different materials.
There was a question about smoke detectors. How come those can't be collected as hazardous waste?
They've got something in there. So even with the hazardous waste program, they may not accept it. A lot of times they'll tell you to mail it back to the manufacturer. And that may be dependent on the hazardous waste program. I'm not 100% certain about that, but I have seen that before, that this is they do ask to send them back to the manufacturer.
Okay, we've got more coming. We'll go for a little bit here.
I have something that I probably should have mentioned, and when you were
Sure.
talking about caps, that got me thinking too. One thing that is still a little hard for me, but really anything that's smaller than the size of a credit card or cap, you really should put it in the trash can rather than recycling it. Even if it's if it's a post-it note or something, you say, oh, that's paper. But little tiny things are just very difficult to sort as it goes through the process. So tiny things should go in the trash.
Okay, here's a question you will like. Can you recycle clam shells if they're plastics 1 or 2?
Oh, that depends on your program. So they are a little different in the way that they're produced or the way that they can be recycled. I know it says it's number one. You think that would be the same. but there is some kind of difference in there as far as how the recyclers can, how they can be reused. So some places accept them, some places don't. I have to hoard them at my house because we are not currently accepting them in Atlantic County. In Atlantic County, our plastics are number one and number two, where the top is smaller than the bottom. So that's bottles and jugs and things like that. So those clamshells are in the no category for me. So I have a big pile of them, and I know that there's other counties near me that I can take them to.
Right, you have to store all that stuff up.
I reused them, a lot of them this spring to plant as a seed starter, as a pot, but there's only so much planting you can do. I think another thing for, another reason why they may not be accepted is that there are some clamshells that are number 5 or, a different number, and some that are number 1. And when this stuff is coming down the conveyor belt really quickly, there's no time to stop and look and say, oh, I think this one has a number 5 on it. So, I think, there's a real push to, make sure there's no contamination. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, and I'll put that as a complaint I have about the world, which is it seems like they always put on so many containers, they put that little recycling number so tiny.
Yeah.
That I'm always struggling to see if I can't even tell if it's a 1 or a 5.
Yeah, it's tricky. But that's one nice thing about, our Atlantic County rule with, I tell people, don't even worry about the number. If the top is smaller than the bottom, most times that means it's number 1 or number 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there was a question basically asking if plastics are really recyclable. And I know you'd mentioned kind of some of them are more readily recyclable than others, and some are quite difficult. But kind of the force of the question was, is it misleading to think of these plastics as being recyclable? Like, is it misleading to put the recycle symbol
Well,
on
the
plastics?
recycling symbol is definitely misleading because not all of them are accepted in the program. Some plastic can definitely get recycled and used again, and that's great. But I think it's important to just to not just see the recycling symbol or know that this is part of what's accepted, and just feel. I think people feel good about recycling. I think and that's great. But I think it's important to be conscious about do you really need it? Is there a way to just use less of the stuff, whether it's recyclable or not?
Okay, is there any move here to push for mandatory composting of, say, kitchen waste or other organics?
Well, we do have the first step for the large generators, and I think that part of that legislation in New Jersey was intended to sort of spur the development of composting facilities, food waste composting facilities, because there's not a whole lot of options right now. So we'll see. I think there's more interest and more discussion about it, but I think in the interim that there's a lot of opportunities for backyard composting, and maybe even on a voluntary community level, at a community garden or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one more kind of well, one there's several questions, but one more question of this type. For the bill, it's A1978 or S864. That's the ban on the single-use plastic bags.
I should have mentioned that, I guess, huh?
Is it? Do you know the status of it? And do
It's
you have
sitting
any
on
other
the
comments?
governor's desk. So we're just waiting for him to sign off on it.
And he is expected to?
Well, he vetoed the earlier version because it wasn't strict enough. I think this one's pretty comprehensive. Okay, fingers crossed, and we can urge our legislators to do a little push.
Okay. So I think we'll just hit there's kind of a series of questions about specific materials, and we'll see if you have any answers on these.
Right.
One said plastic mailer bags that say store drop off. Where do these go?
Oh, so plastic mailer bags, that's like a padded envelope kind of thing? I think if they're 100% plastic, sometimes they've got paper on the outside and bubble wrap on the inside. Those are really challenging, and I hoarded them for a while, and now I just gotta put them in the trash. But the ones that are 100% plastic, I did see on one that you could recycle it with the other plastic film. So that's something you might want to check and see. I would try the Earth 911 tool to see if you can find something close by.
Okay, related to that are containers that are both cardboard and metal, like baking powder canisters.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's got to go in the trash. I know that's a tough one. Yeah, and I hate to. It's so challenging sometimes to try and explain that to people too. But when there's different materials mixed together, a lot of times that just means it's going to be that much harder to recycle it. And most of these things, I mean, in theory, you could recycle it, but sometimes the amount of energy and cost that it would take to do that, to separate out those materials, makes it not worthwhile.
Okay, how about cassettes and VHS tapes?
Oh, good one. Perhaps if you have access to a bulky rigid plastic recycling drop off, but I would definitely, inquire if there is a bulky rigid drop off and see if that's part of the list of accepted materials.
Film negatives and 8mm movie film.
Oh, not sure. I'm kind of thinking that's probably a trash item. But again, try that Earth 911 and see what happens. See what you get.
How about light bulbs?
What kind?
I don't know.
So incandescent, the old school light bulbs that get real hot, those go in the trash. CFLs, the curly Q ones, those have a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of mercury in them, and it's suggested that you put them in a Ziploc bag when they're done, when they burn out, and take them to either your household hazardous waste day or Home Depot and Lowe's. When you go in there, they've got several bins for different kind of recycling, so you can take them there.
Are cereal boxes paper or are they cardboard?
Oh, they're paperboard. How about that? It's a mix. It's more like cardboard, really. But most places will accept them for recycling. The paper is kind of interesting. Things like aluminum and steel can get recycled an infinite number of times over and over and over and over. Paper, as it gets recycled, the fibers get smaller and smaller. So you can't take, for example, a whole bunch of cereal boxes and make beautiful sparkling white office paper from it. But you can mix them in. So that's how that works.
You did use this term rigid plastics in an answer. And there's some questions. I mean, the specific question was about if you can recycle soft plastics other than, say, like plastic shopping bags. But I was wondering if you want to comment on rigid plastics and soft plastics.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what soft plastics would be. And my use of bulky rigid plastics, that's a term that's often used for things like a trash can or the plastic lawn furniture or a milk crate or something like that. Some of those big items, maybe like a cat litter bucket, something like that. And a lot of times bulky rigid plastic is something that we don't really necessarily want people to put into their bin, just because when you have large items, if you think about that tipping floor at the MRF, you've got all this stuff coming out and going up the conveyor belt. When you have big items like that, and they don't just go down smooth on the conveyor belt. So some places will have a special container for dropping off those large, bulky, rigid items.
Okay, let me just hit you with a couple more quick ones.
You guys are asking really
keep
good
coming in.
questions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I can't answer them all. But hopefully I can give you a place where you can go look.
There was a comment that grocery stores often have a collector bin near the door where you can recycle the plastic bags.
Yes. And even some other stores, Target used to have one, Kohl's used to have one. Again, before you load up your car with the year's worth of plastic bags, call and make sure, because there's been some, I've heard from some people, my grocery store doesn't do it anymore. But that there's definitely a market for it. It's not like you can't recycle them. They're just a problem for the, processing wise, getting caught in the equipment.
Mm-hmm. Boxes for frozen meals like lean cuisine, do those count as being in the shiny category?
Well, we tell people now in Atlantic County, we didn't used to make this distinction, but now we tell people no to frozen food boxes. That's because it's got a little, very thin plastic lining that's keeping your food fresh, but it's difficult to separate out when they're doing the processing, making the paper into something else. So we tell people to put, if it comes from the freezer, it should go in the trash.
Interesting. Did you mention fluorescent light bulbs with your light bulbs?
I mentioned the compact fluorescent, the curly Q.
Okay.
Fluorescent bulbs are in that same category as the
Okay.
cells. They've got a little bit of mercury in there.
Plastics that are used to wrap food or wrap bulk purchases?
So like the plastic that might be wrapped around a case of water bottles or something like that, or the plastic that goes around your paper towel roll, that kind of thing. We have in my town, we're collecting plastic and plastic film, plastic bags and plastic film through the company called Trex. They make recycled plastic lumber, and they accept all that kind of plastic wrap and plastic film. They accept that along with the plastic bags. So again, if you can check and find out if it's acceptable, because there's an awful lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, plastic cups that are labeled number 1?
Well, if that's again going to depend on your program. If that's acceptable in Atlantic County, we'd say no, because the top has to be smaller than the bottom. But that's just us. So if I went to Cape May County or Cumberland County, you might have a slightly different answer there. So make sure you find out what's accepted in your county.
And there was a comment that people could, if they're interested in getting that bill passed about the single-use plastic bags, they could contact the governor.
Yeah. Good.
So I think that's all we have for questions. I think I got them all.
Good job. Well, good job, everybody. You really have some great questions. So I hope that people will, continue. If you have more questions, just, shoot them off to me, and, I can, not something something I'm not sure of, I can certainly get a better answer for you.
Okay, great.
I really appreciate the chance to talk to you all, and I hope it was helpful.
Thank you. It's very interesting, very, very informative. Thanks.
All right, great.